Is this crazy? We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history. Make America great again. How can you be against it?
It's typical for the president's portrait to hang in federal buildings, but Donald Trump and his team are taking it to a whole new level. Just this week, a huge image of Trump was unfurled on the building of the U.S. Department of Agriculture alongside Abraham Lincoln's. But deeper than the cosmetic changes that Trump is making, from gilding the Oval Office to trying to upgrade Air Force One, he's also trying to remake Washington in a MAGA image by taking over cultural institutions like the Kennedy Center and the Library of Congress. And of course, there's all the changes and firings happening throughout the federal government. We'll talk about the remaking of Washington today on Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey here with Rhonda Colvin, James Hohmann, and JM Rieger. Thanks for joining us, JM. We're going to check in on that whole Qatari plane thing because that has not gone away. And James and Rhonda are going to take us on a tour of historical presidential gifts, reaching back into the archives. What's the weirdest gift, guys, or one that you wish you could have?
Well, Van Buren was gifted 2 lions, and stay tuned for what happened there.
Pretty weird.
When Barack Obama went to Australia in 2011, they gave him a insurance policy against a crocodile attack.
He was insured. Gift or just
if he would have been attacked by a crocodile, Michelle Obama would get $50,000 cash.
Oh, okay. So. Well, we'll hear more in just a few moments. But let's start in the present. And I just want to talk about the Trump photo for a minute because it's kind of making the rounds, and people were like, "Is that for real?" Because there's like this huge banner that was unfurled from the side of USDA, and it's Trump's official portrait, Rhonda, but the portrait is unusual compared to other past presidential portraits.
It is. He is somewhat, he has a very serious look on his face, and it seems to be in the same spirit as the famous mugshot from when he was booked at the Fulton County Jail.
Absolutely.
That also, I mean, it was certainly unprecedented for a former presidential candidate to have a mugshot, but his campaign was able to use that. If you remember, it was on, coffee mugs, T-shirts. We covered the RNC convention, and it was there. It became sort of this image that was a part of that rallying cry that everyone and the world was against Trump. So he has used a similar look as his official photo.
It's also got this like uplighting, and it's very, very dramatic, really leaning into drama. And it's a little bit angry or edgy, I would say. It's tough guy.
It's tough guy. Honestly, it's the kind of thing you see when you travel to developing countries. When you go to Latin America or sub-Saharan Africa, they have those kinds of tough guy, big pictures of their leader hanging on street lamps and elsewhere. And they make a real effort to build a cult of personality around their leader. It is unusual in Washington, where we tend to venerate symbols of America, to venerate a man instead of an idea.
Speaking of veneration, we're going to see, we think, a parade on June 14th. That's Donald Trump's birthday. What do we know about the parade, and who is it actually for, and who is it celebrating, James?
Well, it's supposed to celebrate the Army, and it just kind of happens to coincide with Trump's birthday
and Flag Day
and so it's pretty unclear, honestly. Like, the Secret Service has made inquiries about it. We know that the Pentagon through Pete Hegseth has expressed some interest, but there's a lot that still is unclear about how big it is and how much of a Trump show it's going to become.
And how much of a military parade it will truly be.
And it's worth noting 2 things. One is that he kind of sort of tried to do this the first time around. I believe it was on 4th of July, if I remember, in his first term, where he had those military flyovers. He had some tanks and other kind of artillery vehicles, if you will, on and around the National Mall, which cost the federal government hundreds of thousands of dollars. On top of that, Trump is really one of the most image-focused presidents. Every president is focused on their image, right? Because that is part of the job, for better or for worse. But Trump, I would say more so than any other modern president we can recall, is so focused on his image and his appearance. And I think all of this kind of coincides and links into that.
So we know that Trump fired the board of the Kennedy Center and he made himself the head of the Kennedy Center and put on a range of other people like Usha Vance, the second lady, and another Trump loyalist to be on the board. But he also did something really remarkable this past week, Rhonda. He fired the Librarian of Congress. Tell us about Carla Hayden and what happened.
Yeah, Carla Hayden was the Librarian of Congress. She was the first female Librarian of Congress, also the first Black person to lead that agency that is under Congress. And I can get to that in a minute. She has a 10-year term. She was almost done with that and now has been fired. Interestingly enough, she is also the first Librarian of Congress since around the 1970s to actually be a professional librarian. Oftentimes, it's a Senate confirmed position. Oftentimes, the person chosen is not a person with a library science background, but she has one, has a PhD actually in that. And she was let go by the Trump administration for reasons that seem pretty vague, but seem to talk about how she was a proponent of DEI initiatives. This is something that we are hearing after the firings of a lot of people of color who work for the government. In fact, Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary at the White House, said that she had on the shelves of the Library of Congress that Hayden put materials that were inappropriate for kids. First of all, the Library of Congress is not a lending library, it's a research library. So no kids are in there looking at books and checking them out. In fact, you have to be 16 to have a researcher card to get into the Library of Congress's research areas and get their materials. So this is something that is really...
Also, I mean, Dr. Hayden wasn't like choosing she's not curating the books that go on the shelves. It's like a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Library of Congress's purpose is.
No, exactly. In fact, the Library of Congress was started in the same bill that set DC as the federal government's capital from Philadelphia, of course. So this was set up by President Adams. And in that bill, it says that Congress should have $5,000 to purchase some books, some research materials.
A lot of money back then.
Right, a lot of money back then. Right now, though, it's a sprawling campus on its own on Capitol Hill. It includes 3 buildings. And this is where so much of the nation's history is. There are like 160 million artifacts, digital or in person, that you can see at the Library of Congress. It is a tourist destination, but altogether it is the research arm of Congress. So that is...
And it's tied to Congress. So how is Trump
Right.
even able to fire her if he's the executive branch and she's the legislative branch?
Well, see, that's what we all have to tune in and find out soon, because this is making waves on the Hill in a bipartisan way. You have Republicans and Democrats saying this is overreach. So right now, they are kind of quietly working on this, talking to the White House about the separations of the 2 branches and how the Library of Congress falls under their purview. However, the Trump administration has said that Todd Blanche, who was formerly the president's personal lawyer, he represented him in the hush money case last year, he now has been named the person who will fill in as interim Librarian of Congress. So again, Congress is trying to figure out, what do we do with this? There is a career librarian that currently works there who is now serving as the acting Librarian of Congress. He wrote to staff on Monday saying, don't listen to anything. I am still overseeing this. And until we get directions from Congress, all things are the same. So
I mean, but there's been like drama.
There's been, yeah, I mean,
national treasure level drama, you know?
Yeah, I hope that.
Tell us more, James, about what happened.
The 2 guys from the Justice Department showed up at the Library of Congress on Monday with the documents saying Todd Blanche is now in charge, and the Capitol Police were called by the Library of Congress, and they said, no, you don't have the authority to do that. And eventually the Justice Department folks left, but literally the cops were called. And Rhonda's absolutely right. It's the Library of Congress, not the Library of the President.
And that's what a lot of lawmakers are saying.
And interestingly, someone I'm watching closely on this is Mitch McConnell. He is now on the Rules Committee, no longer leader, and I think he's pretty upset about this. John Thune, the new majority leader, told reporters that he was asked, was there any consultation by the president before they got rid of the Librarian of Congress? And Thune said, nah, not exactly. And so clearly Trump just did this. They don't offer detailed explanations. You know, we know what Caroline Leavitt said at the briefing, but they just send these 2-sentence emails saying your services are no longer needed. Thank you for your service. And this is an area where, you know, the Librarian of Congress also chooses the head of the Copyright Office, which is actually a kind of important job. That woman got fired on Friday. And there are a lot of questions that the Trump people aren't answering. For example, she released this 100-page report about artificial intelligence recently. And it basically said that companies like XAI, owned by Elon Musk, can't just take all the copyrighted material and train it against their large language models because there's intellectual property rights, that these are copyrighted materials they can't just use. And Musk tweeted a few weeks ago that we should get rid of all IP protections. And so there, I think, are valid questions about, is there any connection between those two things? The administration hasn't said so, but it's hard to think that they're not unrelated.
I want to get more into who else has been fired with you, Rhonda, in a moment. But JM, let's talk about who's taking these jobs. Like, first of all, some people are doing so many jobs. Like Marco Rubio has 4 jobs now. Tom Blanche is already at the Justice Department, and now he's the Librarian of Congress, maybe as well. Like, who is getting these jobs, and what does it say about what Trump values?
Loyalty above all else. That's what he values. He's installing loyalists everywhere. That's been a theme. In his first term, he was installing loyalists everywhere, but he's really taken that to a whole new level this time around. There was kind of the reporting in his first term about how in some ways it was the Fox News presidency because he brought so many people who had previously worked at Fox News into the White House. This time around, he's brought even more into the White House at this point in his presidency. Most recently, Jeanine Pirro, the co-host of The Five, is now interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. So you talk about someone like Todd Blanche, who, as you mentioned, represented him in that hush money case. And we're seeing top lawyers who represented Trump in each of these cases kind of installed in various levers of the government, various positions throughout the government. And this is partially about loyalty with Trump. And it's also just about he wants to enact his vision of government, put his stamp on the government. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to have loyalists who are going to do whatever you say in these roles.
Give us some other examples, Rhonda, of the abrupt firings that have happened really all over at top levels of government.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that raised eyebrows was C.Q. Brown, who was also the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That was something that happened under the direction of Pete Hegseth, and the answer everyone was given was that he was, woke or involved in diversity and inclusion practices. There was also the commander of the Coast Guard. That happened within 2 days of the Trump administration. She was let go, not a lot of reason there. Also, Gwen Wilcox, Jennifer Abruzzo, and Jessica Rutler, who were all fired very recently. I think that was last week from the National Labor Relations Board. So there have been a lot of people throughout. And also the inspectors general, if we all remember that again was another firing move that happened early in the Trump administration.
They're certainly not all women and people of color. Plenty of white dudes have been fired too. But it does seem that Trump has gone after people that he sees are symbols of DEI, or in his accusation have pushed DEI. But so many of these people were just enacting policies. I mean, or they were sort of doing what what government was charged with doing. Just because you're a Black woman doesn't mean that you are DEI or even pro DEI, right? It's like your identity versus your politics. Anyone?
The administration is using this DEI stuff as a catch-all. Anything that they don't like, anything that they think is they want to put blame on, cast blame on, use it as a scapegoat, it's DEI. The plane crash at Reagan a few months ago, they blamed on DEI. When the bridge collapsed outside Baltimore, some Republican congressmen blamed that on DEI. When the assassination attempt against Trump last summer, they blamed on DEI in the Secret Service. You go down the list. When Kamala Harris came in as the Democratic nominee, she was called by some Republicans on the Hill a DEI hire. This has been something that's been building, especially in the far right wing of the Republican Party for years now at this point, and really kind of was supercharged after that Supreme Court affirmative action ruling a couple years ago. And what we're seeing in the Trump administration is not only kind of a willingness to say anything and everything that they don't like is DEI, and therefore we have to get rid of it. But on top of that is a willingness to just put themselves squarely in whatever culture wars there are in this country and to try to shift the culture of the country. That they've been comfortable playing. Trump's been comfortable playing in the culture wars for years, and I think he thinks it's a winning issue. And in some ways, the DEI issue in polling, they're not as underwater as they are in other issues, but they are using this as sort of a catch-all for everything.
I would agree that, the way JM just laid it out, I would agree with that. I also think you have to look at underneath the surface. Yes, DEI is used and given as the reason, but like James just said, the Library of Congress operates the Copyright Office, and you have to think about what the administration might want out of removing a person for whatever reason they want to give and getting their own person in there. So there is always a deeper story to a lot of this, but that message of, anti-DEI, anti-wokeness, that is something that Republicans have been saying, in earnest for the last 2 or 3 years on campaign trails. It works with a lot of their base.
Stay with us. Coming up next, we'll talk some more about Donald Trump's conflicts of interest or perceived potential conflicts of interest, and then presidential gifts. We'll dig into the history, and there are some really surprising and quirky ones to talk about. Stay with us. This is Sidebar from the Washington Post. A reminder, you can watch with us on YouTube or listen to us on your favorite podcast app. So JM, the Qatari plane is still a big story, in part because Trump wouldn't let it go. Like he keeps saying he really seems to really want the plane, right? So it's raised a lot of questions about just what should be allowed in terms of gifts, but also where Trump is coming from in terms of the ethics questions. What are you thinking about?
I think it's worth noting off the top here that Trump comes into office here in the second term with even more conflicts of interest than he had in his first term. And in his first term, he was arguably one of the most conflicted presidents, or had the most potential conflicts of interest of any president in modern U.S. history, just because of his vast business holdings and deals and whatnot. He hasn't divested from anything in his second term here, so he's continuing to visit properties. His sons are continuing to make these foreign business deals. He has this crypto meme coin now. You go down the list, it's conflict after conflict, and we're really seeing it come to a head with this Qatari plane offer. In part, I think, because it's so easy to kind of wrap your head around. He's getting this multi-$100 million luxury jet potentially here. But on top of that, what's especially striking is how Trump for years railed against foreign business kind of influencing politicians, influencing government officials. And now in some ways he's doing exactly that.
Hey, let's listen to a clip from when Donald Trump was debating Hillary Clinton. This is back in the 2016 campaign, criticizing the Clinton Foundation and who he said was supplying the money.
Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money.
What a stunning difference these 8 years have made, James.
Even soon after taking office, he criticized Qatar as president and said that they were in the terrorism game, that they were the biggest supporter of Hamas, that they were harboring Hamas. And today he is in Qatar and he is saying that we're going to defend you, we're going to protect you, you're a good friend. And it's hard not to think that the plane has a little something to do with that.
And it's worth also pointing out that in Trump's first 4 years in office, it's estimated that his companies took in a combined a little under $2.5 billion. In the last month alone, Trump's companies have taken in $2 billion just from deals that they've done. So they've almost matched what they did in the first 4 years by rough estimates. This shows how widespread his potential conflicts are, how kind of all over the map, literally, his sons and his companies have been in terms of creating new business deals. And it's especially striking, to James's point, how he used to talk about Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, how he used to talk about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and their dealings overseas, or in this case, Hunter Biden's dealings overseas. And yet you contrast that with Trump's own family. And we haven't even talked about people like Jared Kushner, who's taking in millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia with his sovereign wealth fund.
Let's listen back to how Donald Trump talked about making money while in the presidency just after inauguration.
Do you intend to continue selling products that benefit yourself personally while you're president?
Well, I don't know if it benefited.
You made a lot of money, sir.
How much?
Several $1 billion, it seems like, in the last several days.
Several billion? That's peanuts for these guys.
Talking about his cabinet? Who's he talking about?
Yeah, he's talking about Howard Lutnick and Scott Besson and some of the other business people who I think were there to announce some deal that they had already actually started in Texas.
But one thing that Republicans have said is like, he doesn't need more money. He's a billionaire. He's working for the American public. But I've never met a rich person who doesn't want more money personally.
And I mean, thinking back to 2015 and 2016 and all the Trump rallies that I went to, one of the central parts of Trump's pitch back then was that he didn't need to raise money at all because the mere act of fundraising for a political campaign was corrupting. And he would brag about how when he was a developer in New York, he could buy off politicians by just giving them money. So you have just dozens of hours of clips of Trump talking about the corrupting power of money. And he very quickly changed his tune. And it's so different. Not only is it kind of taking the dark money, taking political money, but just taking money directly and not even pretending. I mean, that would, I guess you could call that trolling right there. But Trump is basically laughing off questions about his ethics.
So presidents have been offered gifts, sometimes very, very lavish gifts, but there's a lot of like rules and regulations around what they can take and not take. Spell it out for us, James.
Yeah, so the Constitution is actually pretty explicit on this, and it says that if an officer of the United States receives a gift from a foreign power, including monarch or government, that Congress needs to approve it. In practice, the rules say that if a president or a member of the first family wants to keep a present worth more than $480, they have to formally declare their intent to keep it, and then they have to pay federal taxes on it. And so obviously presidents get a lot of gifts from foreign leaders, people come through, and most presidential libraries, when you go to them, they have an exhibit of like funny stuff that the president got, and so getting gifts isn't new. This would be pretty clearly the most expensive gift that any president has ever received.
400 million Qatari plane.
Yeah.
Which is going to the Defense Department.
Well, it's still being negotiated. There are details still being worked out. Trump clearly does really want this to happen. But yeah, essentially they're saying it would be a gift to the United States government, not to the president. And then it would go to his presidential library, although in theory, Trump could still use it for his personal gain after he leaves office. There's a lot that hasn't been ironed out.
So our colleague analyst Roy was on Capitol Hill yesterday talking to Republicans, some of whom voiced concerns about the potential plane exchange, whether it was like safety and security or just taking something from the Qataris. Let's listen though to Senator Markwayne Mullin, who thought this was just totally fine. Let's hear what he had to say.
Could I get your reaction to Trump doubling down on accepting the $400 million jet from Qatar?
I have zero issue with it.
You have zero issue with it?
Zero.
Do you think it raises ethics concerns or national security concerns?
Have you ever been to New York and saw the Statue of Liberty? That was a gift too.
It is. Do you have any safety concerns about, this coming from a foreign government? And
So do you think we're really going to take a plane and not strip it and put all the Air Force One stuff in it, even if it came brand new from the factory?
Okay, so
The irony
yes,
is that the Statue of Liberty was given by the French, but Congress actually had to pass legislation to accept it. And Ulysses S. Grant, on his final day in office, I believe in 1877, signed legislation saying, okay, the United States is going to accept this gift. So that was a very generous gift from the French, but it went through the constitutional process. So I think, Markwayne Mullin probably doesn't know that history.
Rhonda.
Yes, I would have said the exact same thing. It was a joint resolution passed by the Senate and the House to allow the president at the time to install the Statue of Liberty. So it did go through the proper channels. And throughout history, when you see these lavish gifts or, whatever they are from foreign governments to a U.S. president, presidents consult Congress as the Constitution says to do. So do you want to go into a list of, okay.
Yes. And
so,
what happened to the lions?
I know, right? Okay, so Van Buren was gifted by 2 sultans, 2 lions, horses, and pearls. He had a hard time with this. So what did he do? He went to Congress. Congress said, no, you cannot accept this. This is too much. And so the lions were given away to a zoo, and the horses, I believe, were sold. They were sold. The pearls are actually right now in the Smithsonian's possession. So, a president who went through Congress, they said no, and then all of those gifts were given away. Lincoln was gifted swords and elephant tusk from what is now modern day Thailand. He consulted Congress and they said, no, give it to the Interior Department. Lincoln did that. Closer to our time, President Obama, when he received the Nobel Peace Prize, he did consult the Department of Justice lawyers and asked, is this okay? Is there interference here with the Emoluments Clause? They said no, he was good to accept it, but he later gave it away, the award that you get for getting that Peace Prize. He gave that away to charity. But even before all of these presidents, Benjamin Franklin, when he was a diplomat in France, 1785, this has been a problem since around then. Louis XVI gifted Ben Franklin a gold box that had about 400 diamonds inside that encrusted a frame that had a painting of Louis XVI. Ben Franklin didn't know really what to do. There was a really, we're joking, but there was real concern, especially when the country was so young, that a wealthy Europe could use gifts to influence lawmakers or incoming presidents. So this probably was a big moment of hand-wringing for Ben Franklin. But he told Congress about the gift. They actually told him he could keep it. So there's history. He was not, of course, a president, but the Emoluments Clause does extend to any public official in the United States. So
I love it.
Yeah, that's our history.
The Saudis, when Trump went 8 years ago on his first trip, they gave him a bunch of different furs, and those got turned over to the General Services Administration. And then actually there was reporting about them, and it turned out that the Fish and Wildlife Service was supposed to have them. So the Fish and Wildlife Service came and got them, and then they tested them, and it turned out that the various furs that the Saudis had given Trump were fake. They'd been dyed. They were not legit, which is pretty amazing.
We're animal friendly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We were joking before we came on air about what our favorite gift would be. And I think mine might be something that went missing when it was given to Mike Pompeo. He got a $5,800 bottle of Japanese whiskey, and they never found it.
They never found it?
I did not partake, but
someone had a party.
I would love to have a wee dram of that $5,800 bottle of Japanese whiskey.
Now we all know the way to James's heart. Yes. But you would not at all be influenced.
I would not be influenced.
That's right.
And I would ask Congress.
I would ask
Congress. I would ask
just
Rhonda.
to be on the safe side.
Well, James,
I would share.
You would share with
you guys.
Thank you, James. Yeah. James Hohmann, JM Rieger, Rhonda Colvin. I'm Libby Casey. Thank you so much for joining us on Sidebar today. We'll be back next week. We're on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Find us on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. We'll talk to you soon.